Hello, and welcome to Hopeful Conversations, brought to you by Robbie's Hope Foundation. I am your host, Kari Eckert. Joining me today is author Kate King. Kate's book that we will be talking about is titled The Radiant Life Project: Awaken Your Purpose, Heal Your Past, and Transform Your Future. This book is based on Kate's clinical psychotherapy career and her own humble life learnings. Her book is considered a groundbreaking self-healing guide. Kate, welcome to Hopeful Conversations.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here with you.
So your book is about doing the inner work. Is that fair? And to
Yeah.
create a more fulfilling life. Can you kind of take us through what that might mean for our listeners?
Yes. Yeah. So I think the most important work that we can ever really do in this life comes from inside of us. And it's so counter to society and culture that wants us to look outside of ourselves for material happiness or popularity or status. It's really sort of challenging that that's the narrative that is about happiness, and instead focusing on healing the natural wounds that happen throughout a lifetime. Some are large, some are small, and investigating for self reflection, self awareness, and self knowledge that ultimately help to really expand our participation in our own life and help to guide us into the highest expression of how we can live this life that we've been given, and the way that we can sort of step into our gifts and take hold of it, even if we've had trauma or difficult experiences or deep grief in the past, how that becomes sort of woven in to paving the way for a future that can be healthy for ourselves and potentially even positively impact and ripple out toward others too.
Yeah, there's a lot there. A radiant life is the goal.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
did you come up with a radiant life?
It actually kind of dropped in during a meditation. I was on a sabbatical from my private therapy practice because I was in a period of really severe burnout after the peak of the COVID pandemic. And so I was trying to regroup and sort of figure out how I could redistribute my offerings in a new way and revitalize myself. And that word radiant kept sort of coming through. And during meditation one day, the Radiant Life Project just dropped right in. And radiant feels like the right word because it does start from within and it radiates out, sort of to fill the self and then to expand beyond the self. And I think, in my perspective, the most important way to be a positive impact in the world is to start with yourself and to do the healing work really locally inside your own body and heart and mind. And then you sort of plug into society from a healthier version of yourself, and it radiates outward from there.
Mm, yeah. A 4-month sabbatical. You said post-COVID or kind of in the middle of COVID?
It was sort of past the peak when things were starting to sort of open back up, come back to normal. And I had just taken on a lot of mental health work at that time. People were really struggling, and I overextended. As you know, I talk about this a little in my book. Sometimes us therapists, healers, givers, we can overgive to the point of self abandonment, self exhaustion. And it was a lesson. It was an important lesson for me to learn and now teach.
Were you able to notice the cues in yourself right away, or were you reluctant to recognize what you were feeling?
I think it had been building for a little while. And then there was a sort of out of body experience of just feeling so unsafe because of the pandemic. And there was so much fear in the collective. And I have my own personal fear around health and illness and, having my kids home. And it was just such a chaotic time that I think I probably missed some of the early signs. And then when I started to notice them, I became aware of these really sort of heavy responsibilities of like this full caseload I had developed and these people who I wanted to support. And how do I leave them with dignity and with referrals without abandoning? So it was like a complicated kind of, it was like teasing apart a big spool of yarn or something to get myself free to the point where I could take care of myself, which has also become a good lesson of trying not to build my life into a spool of yarn that takes that much untangling.
Ooh, I like that metaphor. Yeah, and that's kind of what society tells us so much of the time.
Yes.
More, more, more. But learning to listen to yourself and being able to fulfill for yourself so that you can help others.
Hmm.
Is that a
Absolutely.
is that natural for most of us or no?
Well, the flight attendants say it on every airline, right? You always put your own oxygen on first. And I know, most of us have flown on an aircraft before and heard that numerous times, but somehow, no, it's not natural. Especially I find for women, and especially for women who are parents or caregivers or healers or teachers. I think it's extra difficult. I found that in my practice with clients as well. So I think this is not a skill that we're born with. I think it's something that we step into this life in this day and age to learn. And it's a skill that we can acquire. And once we do, we can support other people by modeling taking care of ourselves in that way and sort of inviting them to do the same.
Do you find more people want to do that inner reflection and like it seems more I don't want to use the word popular, but like it's a desire for a lot of people right now,
Yeah, I think so. I think
which is such a good thing. I mean,
it is, yes, it's a good thing. And I think sometimes it's spurred by hardship and pain, really. Like people sometimes have to reach rock bottom in their own life in a difficult situation, maybe a global pandemic, maybe who knows what's going on in people's lives where they get to a point where they are hurting so badly that they can't run from themselves anymore. And it's like the plug just unplugs and they have no choice but to take care of themselves.
hmm, I hear you on that one very much because I feel like experiencing the loss of my son, like I was able to, I don't want to say run or hide, but like function, and it felt like functioning well. But those moments still arise that are very, very deep. And because I try to do the work all of the time to take care of myself, that um, I kind of recognize it.
Yeah. And have you found in your experience that when you recognize it and you lean into the work, even if it feels really challenging, if there's a lot of resistance, do you find that it's not usually as tough or as impossible as you thought?
Hmm. For certain.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think my initial reaction is I want to run because I don't want to go there because I'm familiar with the feeling. But then if I can just lean into it just a little bit, it's not at the intensity that it got to, I think, at that rock bottom place.
Right. Yeah. It's almost like leaning into a hug and having the really hard thing hug you back. And sometimes it's a tighter squeeze than you're comfortable with, but sometimes it just feels finally just gratifying and a relief to just acknowledge and lean into the thing that you had avoided for so long or that you felt was so hard because our bodies and our minds are always seeking healing. Like even on a scientific level, the physical body is always trying to heal itself. It knows what to do. Sometimes we just have to get out of the way and let the body do what it does. And I think the same applies to our psyche and to our emotional heart as well. Sometimes we just have to let the healing happen and stop avoiding it.
Mm-hmm. Grow, heal, thrive. Is that's just like a context from your book a little bit. It was more from someone's personal opinion of what your book challenged them to do. Is that a process or is it like you have to do one to where does that happen? Grow, heal, thrive.
I think it's simultaneous, really. And I think everyone's process of healing is so unique that it's like an upward spiral is how I've kind of explained healing to my clients before. You can circle back to the same issue. Maybe you can relate to this with your grief that you come back to the grief or to the issue and you're like, oh, it's not new, but I'm seeing it from a different perspective now because I'm different than the last time I faced this experience or felt flooded by this energy. And so there can be periods of growth where you access new healing and you're like, oh, this is new, or this is a new layer of something that I am familiar with. And when you can lean into it and explore it, then there might be a period of thriving and sort of integrating and owning and stepping into it. And then before you know it, it's a prompt to grow again. Maybe you meet somebody who challenges you, or you have something in the physical body that feels really hard, and you're challenged to lean in and grow again. And so I think, this being human is such a process. It's such an ongoing evolution that we're never really done with, at least until our last breath. And so growing and healing and thriving and growing and healing and thriving over and over and over, just always seeing it as an upward motion.
I like that. I also like that you use the word being human, the words being human.
Yeah.
There's so much resistance to that sometimes.
Yeah. I like the poem by Rumi called The Guest House. And he starts it just by saying, this being human is a guest house, every morning a new arrival. So it doesn't matter if you're being met with joy or with grief or meanness or resistance or competitivity. You just meet it at the door and you invite it in and you see what it has to share with you. And that's the leaning in process to all of the offerings of life, even the uncomfortable ones.
Offerings. There are offerings in your book. Can you explain the purpose of an offering and how we do that? Give me an
Yes.
example of one.
Yes. So, a really core component of my teachings is that this work is not just psychological, it's not just intellectual. Because if you read through the book and you just fly through, you'll understand it on a level, but you might not actually integrate it in a way where it applies and shows up in your life. So, the offerings are meant to provide people with an embodied experience of the work, whether it's a meditation, an art directive, a guided journaling prompt, or something to talk about with friends or family. The offerings sort of take the intellectual teachings of the book and give you a chance to plug them into your specific life in a way that is unique to you, so that you're actually doing the work as you're reading about it.
Yes. And sometimes is there a little bit of reluctance from some people to skip over that part because it is maybe a little bit challenging?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the beauty of a book is you can skip over it and come back to it. You can circle back in a year, in a decade. And if there's something that you're working on right now and it feels a little too tender to go into it in an embodied way, and you'd like to just sort of keep it in the safety of the psyche for a while, maybe in a year, when you've achieved a little more healing, you can come back and do that integrative work. And there's no rush. We have all the time in the world. This work has no urgency. It's really about meeting you where you're at in the moment and inviting you into whatever space you're ready for to dive in and to finally face those parts of yourself that are asking for attention.
About unconscious living versus conscious living.
Mm, yeah, this is really important. So the unconscious is sort of the state that's kind of going on below the surface all the time. It's where we tend to think we're on autopilot. Sometimes people will say, I drove home today from the office and I don't even remember how I got here. Right. So their unconscious is operating there. And thank goodness for our unconscious. Like that's how you know how to use a spoon. You've used it enough times that your unconscious just knows how. But the problem with living exclusively unconsciously or predominantly unconsciously is it doesn't really bring you into awareness of the present moment. It doesn't allow you to see patterns. It doesn't allow you to observe yourself with curiosity or to notice how you're showing up and make little shifts and pivots. Unconsciousness just has you kind of going on autopilot or cruise control. And I think a lot of people do choose to live their entire life that way. And I am in no position to judge that. I think we all have free will. And if that is someone's choice, then I can have full and total respect for that. But like you mentioned, I think there's a rising population who don't want to live that way anymore and who are trying to sort of figure out how to click out of that unconscious living and click into consciousness. And then they find how uncomfortable it is. Because when you're living consciously, you are bumping up against uncomfortable conversations or feelings in the body that maybe you would rather not feel, or issues or patterns that feel like a lot of work to deal with. And so that takes courage, and it takes energy, and it takes willingness. So I don't think it should be anyone's intention to be living in complete present now all the time. I think the goal might be just to sort of come in and out of presence and unconsciousness. And when you notice you've drifted, just bring yourself back and say, how do my feet feel in this moment? Can I feel the ground beneath me? Can I take 2 breaths and just follow them all the way through my lungs? And then notice what happens after you bring yourself into presence, and how much clearer you are, how much your stress might decrease, or your ability to connect with others might increase.
Hmm. Coping techniques there you're mentioning, the grounding and the breath pattern,
Mm-hmm.
conscious living. Where does our complete on our phones and on media and being bombarded like all of the time by so many different elements come into that?
Well, I think we're invited out of consciousness all the time, every day. And I think sometimes it can feel like moving through quicksand to try to regain that conscious presence and awareness in life, because there are so many distractions. And it's really tempting. It's seductive to pick up your phone and doom scroll, or go down the rabbit hole of comparing to other people on social media. There's just so many ways to kind of clock out, to feel numb. And when people are in a lot of pain, feeling numb is appealing because it doesn't hurt so much. But they don't realize that although it's okay to sort of tap into that numbness sometimes when you need it, it's not a place where we want to live, because ultimately it's like a downward staircase where numbness can become addiction. It can turn into depression. It can demolish relationships. It can make, really poor decisions that are made from that unconscious place instead of a conscious, authentic presence with life. So I would invite people who are using a lot of numbing, whether it's their phone or the internet or streaming Netflix, whatever it might be, just to observe themselves in that situation of numbing and ask themselves, what am I actually feeling right now? So before you open the fridge or before you push the on off button, just challenge yourself to pause for 5 seconds and identify a feeling. And if you can identify a feeling, you may not want to stream Netflix or eat ice cream. You might actually want to go to your journal and explore that feeling, or call your best friend and say, oh my gosh, I'm feeling this way. And I didn't even realize it until now.
Mm, I like that. Oh, goodness. And you mentioned the word authentic. Like, break that down in Kate's words for us.
I think of authentic as what is real. Like if you have an authentic leather jacket, right? It's the real thing. It's not pretending to be something it's not. And the way that you show up in every moment has a different sort of tune of authenticity than every moment before. Who I am authentically now is different than who I was authentically yesterday, because I'm a different version of me. My cells have turned over. I have slept since then and processed in my dream state, and I'm here today. So authenticity is really showing up who you are, as you are, how you are in the moment, as truthfully and honestly as possible. And that includes relationships, like being able to really meet your relationships and ask yourself if it feels aligned, if it feels like something you want to give or a person you want to be with. It applies to the work you do in the world. Like, does this really feel true for me? Does this feel like my real offering in this life? Does this feel like my purpose? So if we're really living authentically, it can be as simple as just yes or no to everything. As easy as it is, like, do you want a hamburger or a hot dog, right? Just making decisions from moment to moment about what feels like it's in clearest and most consistent alignment with who you are in the moment.
Oh, goodness. I just like want to listen more to you. I mean, I've read the book, but it's like live in person. It's just very exciting. Um, In therapy, you ask your clients to consider a shadow side versus a sunny side of a topic,
I love.
undesirable versus negative qualities,
Mhm.
counterbalanced by a positive, beneficial perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this because it makes life as a human being three-dimensional. Like if you're in an experience that at first feels really hard or really bad or negative, I think it's worthwhile to say, okay, that's the shadow side. So perhaps say you wake up in the morning and first thing in the morning you see an email from your boss and you're in trouble because of something you did yesterday. You got caught. I don't know what happened. That could be the shadow side. Like, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble. I'm afraid. I'm nervous. There is always, always another side. There's a sunny side and a shadow side. So if the shadow side is this feeling of fear and of nervousness, then the challenge is to ask yourself, where could the light be here? Maybe there's room here for growth. Maybe there's something here I didn't see yesterday that I missed. Maybe this is my opportunity to stand up to this person and say, hold on a minute. I think you're misperceiving something or misunderstanding. And in so doing, I am actually practicing courageousness and bravery and standing up for myself. Or maybe it's an invitation into humility where you meet the discomfort of your boss reprimanding you and you say, you're right. I'm so sorry. That was a mistake that I made, and I am going to work on making it right. And that would be the sunny side because it's growth inspiring. Humility is deepening for your experience into connection, and it can be reparative in a relationship that is building trust. So, no matter how dark or difficult something seems, there's always a sunny side. There's always like a silver lining, something you can grow, something you can learn, a perspective you can gain from it. And the same goes for something that seems really amazing and beautiful. There could also be a shadow side. Like you think of a young couple who are about to get married and they feel so in love and they feel so happy and their whole life is ahead of them, but maybe they're not acknowledging the shadow side of how scary it feels to step into this commitment that is a lifelong commitment and all the unknown factors. Like, what do we mean when we say in sickness and in health? Start to think about that. That feels pretty scary. So there's a shadow side there. So everything is multidimensional. It has at least two sides, probably more.
Thank you for explaining that. Um, people, do people grab onto that? It sounds very helpful to like try to process situations that way, experiences that way, opportunities that way.
Yeah, it does help people because it provides a reframe for what they think they already understand. It gives them an invitation to perceive what they think they know differently and to ask themselves if there's anything I'm missing or if there's anything I could add to this that would make it more rich or more alive or dynamic for me in my life. And so much of inner healing begins with working with the thoughts that we think. And we tend with our thoughts to sort of go to this binary place of like good or bad, right or wrong. And if we can challenge that by saying, okay, this initially feels bad, but is there a gem of wisdom or, a pearl of goodness in here? Then suddenly what seemed bad isn't so bad. And you're not believing your thoughts, you're working with them.
Believing and working. Ooh, wow. I don't mean to jump around here, but there is so much good in this book. I can just tell in like the language that you use as a live person, like, wow, it's very rich. What about the practice of anchoring?
Anchoring is a really important practice for this work because it helps to kind of ground you in your life in a world where there's so much going on. And especially with technology, so many people tend to be in their heads a lot, in their thoughts, in their worries, and their fears. So, anchoring is basically finding things, people, yourself, qualities of you in the moment that you can really trust and rely on, that can sort of hold you to the ground in the eye of the storm so that you can then observe the storm with curiosity. And from a grounded place, you can say, gosh, there's a lot of stress around me. Do I want to participate in it? Or did I create it? And how can I back out of it? Because if we're not anchored, then we get caught in that storm and we get carried miles. We could get carried around the world in a storm without an anchor. So, the same way that it functions for a boat in the ocean, keeps them from drifting off course, your anchor keeps you present in your life. And so, examples of an anchor, there can be emotional, physical practices, people, all kinds of things. You can have lots of different anchoring things in your life. For me, I get really anchored by nature. So if I feel stressed or unconnected to myself, I just need to lace up my shoes and go outside. And the feeling of my feet on the path will bring me back, because that's an anchor for me. The feeling of the sun and the air and the trees, it's important for me. I also have just a small amount of people in my life who I know can anchor me, people who I can be authentic with, who I've really established trust with. And I can go to that person and say, I feel really chaotic today, or it's been really heavy, and they're there to process with me, to sort of help to move that energy through my body. So I invite people to really explore. I'm an art therapist too. So
Yes.
creativity, art, making music, dance, anything that feels creative and expressive can be very anchoring, because it moves that energy through as well.
Okay, so you just moved on to one of my questions about art therapy, and how, like, if we aren't using that part of our brain, how we get stuck where we last used it.
Yes. Yeah, it's like a muscle. So often I'll have a client who says, "Oh, I'm not a good artist. I just draw stick figures," and they're adults. And I say, "Of course you draw stick figures. When was the last time you drew?" And they say, "Oh, I mean, maybe second grade or third grade." And developmentally, that's when we draw stick figures, in second or third grade. So to be able to remember that, just like any other muscle, creativity sort of stops when you stop using it. And if you stopped making art when the art teacher was drawing stick figures, then that's kind of where you still are, which means that you can kind of reactivate it and go back there. Also, stick figures can be incredibly expressive. So I invite people not to judge that. And so often, we can do art practices that don't have that initial judgment of, good or bad, that so many of us got in elementary school from art teachers with good intentions, but sometimes, they unintentionally squashed people's little spirit when they were making art. So drawing with your non-dominant hand, or drawing without any conceptual idea, letting it be abstract, letting it just be lines, letting it just be colors, blending with your fingers and allowing it to be a sensory experience instead of always having to have analytical meaning. These are all ways to just sort of tap into being creative without being too attached to an outcome. Because in art therapy, we talk about how the process is equally or sometimes more important than the product. And people in our society tend to be so attached to the final product and wanting to create something that they hang up on the wall, that they don't enjoy the process. It's really stressful and they feel like it has to be perfect and look a certain way, when really the entire process is just about expression.
Mhm. Goodness. And it's less and less people like use that part of their brain because of social media and what we are using our time for versus that creativity piece. And I like how in your book you talk about the creativity isn't just art. It's in more aspects of our lives.
Oh, absolutely. It's everywhere. I think every career, no matter how cognitive or cerebral it is, they all have creative elements. My husband works in the banking industry, which I think most people would say is not very creative, but he builds these really intricate, beautiful portfolios for his clients that are so creative. The way that he sort of decides what to bring in and blend and connect and shift, and it's incredible. The way that he talks and connects with people is really creative, because he's finding common ground and he's listening to them and hearing what matters to them. So that's a really creative process that doesn't involve crayons or markers. It involves the part of the brain that's sort of finding inspiration and taking in ideas and digesting them and transforming them and then sublimating them back out for meaning. Really, creativity is about just making and finding meaning.
Mm. And does your husband think he's creative?
I don't know if you would identify that way, but I see him that way. Occasionally, we will make art together, And, he's loosened up over the years. I've been working on him now for like almost 25 years. And so he's gotten a little more comfortable with more conventional forms of creativity. But yeah, I think he would probably say that he's creative.
Okay. One last question. Internal Family Systems, IFS, developed by Richard Shorts. IFS teaches that each person possesses a true self, who we are at our most basic essence. But then life happens and we have a fractured self. How does IFS come into us?
I love IFS. It's been the most healing modality for my personal work, and it has been by far my favorite work to do with clients. I've also found a way to bridge it with art therapy in a process I call parts cards that I share in the book as well. So, internal family systems is not actually about your family. It has nothing to do with anyone else except for you. It's about you and all the internal parts of yourself. And people tend to sort of identify this without even knowing, where they say, yeah, part of me wants to go on that vacation, but a part of me is really exhausted and just wants to sleep at home. So, right there, they're talking about two different parts of themselves. And internal family systems is about the investigation of all the different parts of us. And it holds true that there is an actual true self that is the essence of who we each are. It's based on kindness and compassion and creativity and clarity. It's just this really warm, kind of loving presence. But when life happens, we fractal off into these different parts that are adaptive. They form to protect us from different threats in life. And sometimes they might be big and sometimes they might be small. Like if a child realizes that they're the small one on the playground and there's these big kids that might be bullying them, they might create a part in that moment where there's a part that avoids big kids. Or conversely, there might be a part who's like, I'm little, but I can still fight you. That's not the true self, but it's a part that developed to protect you. And what happens is that child from the playground, 40 years later, might still use those same methods for protection. They might run away when there seem like there are more smart, more competent, more experienced people in the room, or they might puff up their chest and say, I can take you. And they don't realize that that part of them, even though they're in their 40s, 50s, 60s, is actually rooted in childhood, and it comes from an unhealed place of not feeling safe in the world. So, internal family systems is about noticing these different parts and how they show up in adulthood and helping to unburden them of some of these jobs they've been doing for us and just reintegrate them in the system in a way that works in adulthood, where you might say, gosh, I don't really need to do that anymore because I'm an adult now. I'm not a child on the playground anymore. So it's like updating your system the same way you would update your phone or your computer. You have to do that internally.
Mm. Okay, I have two more because you mentioned it, and now it's like you just mentioned the word compassion and how you say that, like, part of trauma healing, there's a big piece of compassion. What does that look like or feel like for an individual?
So, compassion is a perspective of warmth towards the self, if it's self compassion, or compassion towards another person. In the book, I kind of draw the differences between sympathy, compassion, and empathy, because those three terms tend to get really convoluted and they're not synonyms, they are different. So, I think of empathy as being flooded by someone else's experience to the point where you sort of lose where you end and they begin. You're both feeling what they're feeling. And just like a drowning person, you can both kind of drown in that experience.
That's
So
empathy.
that's empathy. Compassion is like empathy plus mindfulness plus boundaries. So compassion is, I see your pain, I see your experience, but I also remember that I'm not you. And so I can support you and feel warmth and love towards you while also allowing this to be your experience. And then sympathy is like one step further, where it's disconnected. Like, I see you're struggling and I feel badly for you, but I'm just going to go on with the rest of my day. And what you have going on isn't really going to impact me very much. So when you talk about compassion, that would be like compassion towards another person would be that empathy plus mindfulness and boundaries, right? Like I see you're suffering, I see what's going on, I feel for you, but I'm going to let this be yours. Self-compassion is when you apply it inwardly and you sort of treat yourself with that kindness of, okay, I see, I feel, I sense my experience. This is tough. This is hard. I feel warmth. I feel softness toward myself. I'm giving myself some grace. And I'm also allowing this to be my experience. And I'm getting curious about it and I'm showing up for it.
Self-compassion and compassion for others. Oh, wow. Versus empathy and sympathy. Those are, I can relate to that for the trauma piece. I was a funeral director for a number of years. That's my background prior to being a mom. And like, and I always thought of Robbie was incredibly empathetic, and I think I'm empathetic, but
Mm-hmm.
I like the compassion piece. Like that takes it to a whole nother level. There's an element of respect in there.
Yeah, it's giving someone the dignity to navigate their own pain and navigate their own experience and not trying to swoop in and save them from the difficulty that they face, because that's an important lesson for them. We don't want to enable people to avoid their pain. We just want to hold space while they do what they want to do with their free will.
Mm. I hear a little bit of mom piece in there too. Goodness, for us as women. Goodness, goodness. This has been such a wonderful conversation. And I just really challenge our listeners to check out your book, The Radiant Life Project: Awaken Your Purpose, Heal Your Past, Transform Your Future by Kate King. But Kate, before we let you go, I want to ask our same question we asked all of our guests. Kate, what does the world need to hear right now?
I think the world needs to hear that we get a say about what happens next. And the way that we show up and the way that we do our work and bring it into the world will help to steer the direction of what happens next.
Awesome. Thank you. And your website to point people to?
Yes, it's theradiantlifeproject.com.
Okay. Kate King, thank you so much for being a guest today on A Hopeful Conversation. Be sure for our listeners to tune into our next episode. And until then, remember, hold on, pain ends. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.